Good morning. We are live on the Falcons Podcast. It is a gorgeous Wednesday in the Southeast. My name is Scott Kennedy. I will be your host. Over on this side over here is Nick Kendall. He's in Seattle. I'm in Atlanta, so we're kind of coast to coast with your football coverage. And things have settled down a little bit as teams have settled in. The Falcons have added 18 players over the course of the last week, Nick. And we'll get into a couple of those beyond, the NFL draft, which we've hit on pretty extensively here in the last couple pods. What I want to get into today is we'll talk a little bit about the trade up that came out today with the Jets. Okay, that was a possibility. It wasn't a trade back. It was actually a trade up with the Jets. I want to talk a little bit about Illinois quarterback and Big Ten that the Falcons signed as an undrafted free agent, where he might fit on this roster. And then I want to talk about potential additions to the roster. They'll sign guys all the way through the week of the Super Bowl. So that keeps happening. Where else will the Falcons look to try, and who is still out there and who might be out there as possible cap casualties, et cetera, et cetera. So all the things we want to get into this week, today on the Falcons podcast. Nick, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty well. I think maybe we are entering the 4-month sleep regression, which is not super fun, and typically we get him to bed, the little guy to bed 7:30 to 8:30 range, and yesterday it was not in bed until 9, and then he woke up like 3 or 4 times in the next hour. So not a lot of sleep. Got to bed, about 11:30 and up at 4:30. So kind of a short chunk, but he slept that time through. So we did have that going mostly.
It's amazing. You get used to not sleeping, and then 5 hours sleep, you're like, whoa, I feel great.
Yeah, the last 3 weeks or so, he'd been sleeping like 8 hours straight, which was incredible. And last night was really hard to put him to bed. So little more tired than normal, but God bless. That's why we have Lion Coffee.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We'll hit on Lion Coffee here in just a bit. Want to say hello to some folks. We go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday because we like having a conversation with you. So I want to say hello to some folks that got here before we even went live. Like John Harrell, he says, good morning, Scott and the Falcons family. Red Swarm, he wants to talk about some possibles. And I'll tell you, Red Swarm, I did my homework on the safeties really more than anything because I think that is the Falcons' number one need left on this team that can be fixed in a positive way. You could go get edge rushers. Yeah, you could go get corners. But I still think there's impact safeties out there that can be had where everything else you're trying to kind of patch holes. Maybe I can get a trade on a guy like Jeffrey Okudah, but there's still Pro Bowl safeties out there that are available, and I put one of them on the cover of this podcast, and Justin Simmons. Mm-hmm. He says, I'm hoping that we can sign a legitimate starting level cornerback. Akello Witherspoon is someone that Coach Ra is familiar with that I like. I don't know much about him, Red Swarm.
Really kind of a lanky cornerback, was in that really great Colorado Buffalo backfield with Chidobe Awuzie. They had 2 NFL cornerbacks on that team, so that was a blip there, considering where CU has been as a football program. And yeah, he was drafted by, I want to say the 49ers. What I remember in the NFL is him standing out on the 49ers. Do we have a cat going on here?
No, my Lion Coffee is now on my desktop.
Oh, man, that is a tragedy. Well,
as I was pulling my hand away, it got stuck in the handle, and
oh, no.
I had spilled.
All right, well, if you need to take care of that, I can monologue here for a second, but Akello Witherspoon, a skinny cornerback, good length, decent movement skills for the height, but again, kind of a rail thin kind of guy, and I think not a terrible option there for a cornerback 2-3 competing on the boundary. He's one of those guys like the Broncos brought in Levi Wallace. He's not a great cornerback at this point, but you have a chance to have him compete and earn some snaps.
Ryan Adonis coming back in. He says, great to be a Falcons fan. Good morning, everyone, to you as well. Atlanta Focus says, boy, I thought we signed him. I'm not sure. Oh, I put Justin Simmons on the cover. That's what it was. And Ryan says, I think the signing period is over. We have our roster set this year. No, it's never set. The roster will change. Literally, they sign guys during the playoffs that can end up playing. You see it a lot with running backs, but it doesn't seem right to me. But you can actually add guys all the way up like to the week of the Super Bowl to put on your team if they're free agents. So definitely not set. But Justin Simmons right now is a guy that I put him on there. Let's try and will this in. Let's see if we can make it happen. Justin Simmons is an Atlanta Falcon, makes so much sense. And he's still out there. We talked about that some of these veteran safeties, Nick. Let's see how the draft plays out. Let's see what happens. Well, the draft is out. The Falcons didn't add a safety. A couple of these veteran safeties are right there. I want you to hit on Justin Simmons. I'm going to grab a paper towel real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, Justin Simmons has been the consummate professional for the Denver Broncos for ever since he was drafted out of Boston College, the end of the 3rd round. And I can't talk about Justin Simmons without talking about the community work, the locker room aspect. He is a pro's pro. I mean, you hear him get up and talk or do anything, and it's like he's so polished. It's like, is that guy a professional? Obviously, or a politician? Obviously, super intelligent, great guy as well. And that's not even the football field aspect, of course. He had to have led the NFL in interceptions over the last 10 years. Really good, versatile safety as well. He can do the single high stuff. He can do 2 high stuff. Not necessarily the best in the box per se, where he's like a Cam Chancellor cover 3 strong safety type. There can be instances where he is long. He's got great instincts, but sometimes can get juked a little bit in space, where he is coming downhill in the box, but a really good safety. And again, the ball skills, the interception ability, he's somebody, even despite Denver's horrific pass rush, which Atlanta, I mean, it's been a competition the last 2 seasons between who can be more anemic up front, between the Broncos, Cardinals, and the Falcons. But Simmons is still getting his hands on the football. So again, veteran leader, you know what you're going to get. And I harp on here, Scott. The 2 big things for me analytically that, like, if you win these 2 things, you should have a chance to win the football games. I think everybody knows about turnovers. That's number 1, of course, besides points, duh. But after that, it's explosive plays. And Simmons can help you in both. He helps take away explosive plays, and he takes the ball away. So he'd be a hell of a get for you.
Oblivion Empire, good to see you. Breaks the ice with a super chat. He says, good morning, guys. Let's have a wonderful day. Smash those likes. Thank you, Jason. Hope you're doing well this morning. I think one of the interesting things is, Nick, what was the difference between the Denver Broncos defense with Simmons on the field compared to when he wasn't on the field?
I mean, the back end was completely amiss. I don't know.
Chaos.
Terrible. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just Justin Simmons when he missed time. It was the combination of Justin Simmons and Josie Jewell at the same time, who are both like the brains in the middle of the defense, and to lose them both against the chaos, hyper speed, pre-snap movement, guns blazing offense that was the Miami Dolphins out of the gate this season, that was bad. I mean, obviously 70 points, unbelievable. But yeah, you'd be very happy with Simmons. You could do so much in the back end of your defense, pairing him with a Bates as well. I mean, that would be easily the best safety duo in football. Now, again, safety might be the least valuable position on defense today, but it's still, if you can get difference makers, it's important. But yeah, he'd be a heck of a get. I did want to ask you, Scott, we got Oblivion Empire. Thank you so much. And Edward Brown coming in with the big super chat with $20. We talk a lot about replacing Richie Grant, but I mean, a year ago preseason, the guy we talked about almost every single show was DeMarco Helms, who was DeMarco Helms. I look at our lads, and he's listed as the number 1 safety on that depth chart. I mean, are we overlooking Helms? I mean, I know he was only a 7th round pick, but the preseason tape was awesome. It's year 2. I mean, maybe they're betting on him.
He worked his way into a starting role. And again, what's interesting to me is you've got so many defensive backs coaches in there. And I started thinking, okay, well, maybe Raheem Morris, defensive backs coach, maybe Jimmy Lake, defensive backs coach. Maybe they want to get a really good look at these guys before they make a decision. And then I just remember, well, Jerry Gray's there. You know, they're going to trust and if Jerry Gray goes to bat for one of these guys or say, listen, I need something else, you're going to listen to him. He was held over from the previous staff, and he's good. So the one to me is DeMarco Helms is on this team. He will be battling for a number 1 spot basically unless they bring in a guy like Justin Simmons. The one that I'm really interested to see what they do with, and right now I still hedge towards Richie Grant will not play on this contract. He may get cut and re-signed. He may get cut and picked up. But at $4 million with $3.1 million savings, I don't think Richie Grant is – I think he's going to be in the news here before fall camp opens, or, at least towards the end. I have a hard time seeing him playing on that contract with the Atlanta Falcons. So, yes, DeMarco Hellams is in the mix, without a doubt. D. Alford is in the mix. Some of those guys are there. Mike Hughes, they are there. And Jesse Bates was actually asked yesterday by D-Led, hey, they didn't sign anybody. They didn't draft anybody. What's that tell you about the confidence that they have in the group that's there? And Jesse was like, he's like, that's great and all, but it's a new year. He goes, we have confidence in what we do, but we know we got to keep doing it. You can't rest on your laurels around here, which I think was a fantastic answer from your Pro Bowl safety.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely the outside of Kirk Cousins. And, well, I don't know. They didn't really empower him as a leader in the draft. We don't have to go down that path. But Bates and Grady Jarrett got to be the two big leaders on this team. I mean, it's the contract, of course, is a big one. And then just the experience and play on the field. So, yeah, Bates is you got to be excited about what Bates is going to do this season. And we talked about, the Falcons pass rush being poor on paper. They should be still better yet this season. I don't think they're going to be, special by any means, but hopefully better again this season, taking a step forward. Talk about taking a step forward. Edward Brown helping us here, $20, helping us take a step forward this morning with the very generous super chat. Thank you so much, Edward. He says, we need corners. Does AJ only play one side and not travel? Surprised they didn't draft a top tier corner considering some of the wide receivers they'll see this year. You see Evans twice, Olave, Lamb, Brown, Adams, Jefferson, Metcalf, Pickens, and Neighbors. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a drop there on some of those guys in comparison, but that's kind of the reality of the NFL, right? There's a lot of good receivers, and those guys still get paid. We have not jumped shark as far as there's so many that we don't value them anymore. That's not even close to there yet. So it'll be interesting to see. I will say you can kind of get away. I don't want to go too far down the schematic wormhole here, Scott, but with what teams are doing right now schematically, if you do have a true cornerback one, you can effectively double the other side with your safety and cornerback. And as long as you trust number one, I mean, the Patriots got away with this for a number of years where they had their best cornerback and go against teams number twos and then double other teams number ones. And it worked pretty well, despite what you think, put your best against the best. Two's better than one a lot of times. So I think, it would have been better to go into the season with a better cornerback on paper than Clark Phillips, Antonio Hamilton, D. Alford, Mike Hughes, however that ends up working. A couple of those guys, Nichols, probably, of course. But yeah, of course. Yeah. But, with how you approach the draft and how free agency played out and everything, you didn't. So on paper, it's a big question mark and a weakness long term. But with the off coverage, soft zone stuff you can do, the two deep safety shells with one good cornerback on one side, you still can't effectively roll coverage over and pseudo double the other side to help impact and slow down other teams' wide receivers. So yes, you like a better cornerback, but you can scheme out a little bit to help yourself there.
Edward, thank you so much. And we talked about it a lot on Monday about just the style of this draft. And it's funny because Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic posted, not word for word, but had the very same on Twitter last night. Just that, listen, once you come to grips with this is not a win now draft and it's a draft for the future, it starts making more sense. You got your quarterback of the future. You went for your defensive line replacements, depth, et cetera, et cetera. It's a draft for the future. Okay, that makes sense. It's just it's not a very common strategy to admit that to your fans before you even start, especially right after you sign a quarterback to a big contract. It's kind of what we said on Monday. Mm-hmm. So with this draft, what you're going to be doing more than every other draft I can remember is looking down the line at the 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that were drafted after your pick and seeing what kind of rookie impacts they had. Because yes, a cornerback too would have had a bigger impact if he's successful than a backup defensive lineman. So you keep an eye on guys. They started going at 40. The Falcons traded up to 35 to take Arroyo, a very toolsy defensive lineman that could have a really long career. But when you bypass Cooper DeJean at 40, Kool-Aid McKinstry at 41, Kamari Lassiter at 42, Max Milton at 43, when you have a need at corner, you start keeping an eye on that. So, yeah, was it surprising that they didn't go corner? If you're trying to fill immediate needs, yes. If you're trying to build for the long term, I'm never going to complain about taking D-line. So, and that's what this draft turned into, was building sustained success instead of the immediate gratification. But that's assuming that, you don't hit on the corner too, because a 10-year corner is a pretty valuable piece as well. So, but I do like the defensive line for sure, and the rotation in there. They play a lot. So Keith Brugman also comes in. He says, Scott, I'd love to hear your inside perspective on undrafted free agents. How crazy is that process once the final pick is made? It's frantic. It's probably a hell of a lot more hectic than the draft itself, because there's God knows how many teams trying to get a few of these guys that fell through. And it's even more. And you've heard people say before, probably, Keith, that it's sometimes better to be an undrafted free agent, getting the phone calls, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night once the draft ends, as opposed to being a 7th round pick, because you can go into a spot and actually maybe even negotiate a little bit more money that is better for you. That said, most undrafted free agents, you're just hoping to get a practice squad guy. Now, this comes up now, the Illinois quarterback. What can you tell us about him? Because right now, I think, which goes back to another kind of questionable quarterback move of guaranteeing, instead of moving on from Taylor Heineke, he ended up getting a little bit more guaranteed money than he would have. So his dead cap number is a little bit higher if you move on from him. But to go Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix, Taylor Heineke, or you bring in a dirt cheap rookie as your third quarterback, that starts making a little bit more sense than having an expensive number 3 to me, Nick.
I mean, John Paddock, he was the backup for Illinois for most of the season, and then he got a shot late and had some pretty awesome throwing stats out there. Now, granted, I think both his wide receivers ended up being drafted into the league, which, as an Iowa fan, I don't even know what that looks like or feels like. But especially for Illinois, I mean, why should they be getting NFL guys? We're right here. But yeah, no, Paddock threw it around the yard. Somebody who has a chance, I think, to be competing with Heineke, probably practice squad year one, though. I think, given the small sample size, thought he did a pretty good job manipulating the pocket and wasn't afraid to give his wide receivers a chance to go get it as well. But yeah, Paddock was impressed with him. He had a tough game against Iowa's really good defense this year, and he kept him in it to the very end. So did Iowa's offense, keeping Illinois in it to the end. But yeah, that is he'll be interesting to follow. I definitely enjoyed watching him. I can't remember what game it was. He put up like 500 yards against whoever they played the week before they played Iowa this season. So yeah, he definitely tossed her ground. And for a Big Ten West team, that is not the norm.
Yeah, and again, it makes more sense to me to get some cap space back from Taylor Heineke. I mean, we already talked about $3.1 million savings from Richie Grant. And then the dead cap number now is cap hits 4, dead cap is 1, but you already saved your money there. You already saved like $3 million. So the cap savings on him would be about a total of about $4 or $5 million. There's Justin Simmons. There's your safety money right there. Mm-hmm. So, but it doesn't make sense to me to keep Heineke now. I mean, Heineke was great leader, really good for helping develop, was newest place and teammate. Well, I don't need that anymore. I don't need that anymore. If something happens to Kirk Cousins, I don't want Taylor Heineke in there. Mm-hmm. I want Michael Penix in there, and I want him in there too sweet. I don't want Taylor Heineke taking reps away from Michael Penix on the practice field, in games, in any way, shape, or form. I need another number 3 quarterback now. This makes sense to me. Now, is this the right guy? I don't know that, but Taylor Heineke to me as a number 3 doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me anymore. Want to say hello to some other folks that have come in. There were some Terry Clark has a very positive statement. He says, good morning, ATL, Scott and Nick. Gentlemen, in my opinion, post-draft, the Falcons have the best quarterback room, OL, trio of playmakers in Bijan, London, and Pitts in the division, and 8 deep across the defensive front. In the division, I'd take Kirk Cousins over Derek Carr in New Orleans, and then Bryce Young's an unknown, and Baker Mayfield's pretty hit or miss. What's the word? Volatile, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd agree with that. Offensive line looks good. Trio of playmakers looks good. The defensive front looks good. Now, Terry, based on this, 2 points on this, Nick. One, the Falcons have the 4th best playoff odds right now in the NFL. This is a big reason why right here, Terry, is this is a big reason why. Is the division isn't great and the Falcons are solid in a lot of areas. So playoffs was one. I forgot what my other point was. I'll come back to it.
The division has to be up there. I mean, it's a pretty crappy division overall. I mean, Carolina has their owner going into restaurants and snatching off people's hats. You have the Bucks, who were kind of a anomaly last season. Now they've paid Baker Mayfield. I mean, I wouldn't trust the Bucks to recapture that. And the Saints, I mean, they're still Derek Carr-esque and Dennis Allen very much on the hot seat. I mean, this is the worst division top to bottom in football on paper now. Let's see how it plays out. But I think Atlanta it makes sense that they have the 4th best odds, not because they're the 4th best team in the NFL, but the path to get there is not as tough as other teams, for sure.
Roderick, good morning. Pamela, good morning. Hope you are doing well. She says, good morning. Ryan comes in. He says, I am tired of people talking about money for a quarterback when it's the most premium position in football. Literally every good quarterback today is making $30 to $60 million a year. It's just how it is. Unless they're on a rookie contract. The first 4 years, unless they're on a rookie contract, they're not making $30 to $60 million a year. And that's kind of what you're hoping to do when you draft a rookie quarterback, especially one that is a 6-year senior and 24 years old and you think could play right away. So the problem with spending $25 million, $90 million guaranteed on Kirk Cousins and then drafting a quarterback is you lose the cost benefit of a good rookie quarterback where you could have spent somewhere else. So at the very beginning of this, when we started talking about quarterback options in January, Nick, my number one option was always a rookie. You hit on the rookie. It's like you said before, and I like the phrase, it's a cheat code. Mm-hmm. So it's not Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. It's would you have rather had Michael Penix, Danielle Hunter, and Jonathan Greenard? Because those 2 edge rushers got combined $90 million in guaranteed money, same as Kirk Cousins. Would I have rather had those 2 guys and Michael Penix? Yeah, I would have, for sure. So for me, it's about, okay, this is what good ones cost eventually, yes, but what else could I have done with that money in free agency? And I think, and Ryan, and then I'll be done with this. We'll move on unless anybody has any specific questions. I just kind of think reverse the timelines, okay? Let's put free agency after the draft. Falcons go Michael Penix at number 8. Okay, there's some questions about his medicals. Can he do this? There's questions about the prospect. Okay, that goes with every player in existence. But nobody's questioning the fact that they took a quarterback. Then you get to free agency in April. Okay, you got some big holes on the team. You really need pass rusher. You do this, you do this. You just gave the most guaranteed money in free agency this year to a quarterback. Everybody's reaction would be identical to how it was on draft night. It wasn't about Penix. It wasn't about the draft. It was about the combination of the 2. So was my reaction. That's how I feel about it, was do one or the other. And again, if it works out for Michael Penix on a long enough timeline, nobody's going to care.
Yeah.
But right now, I have to think, this is what we do here, Nick. If you wanted Penix and you weren't sure, I think you were right on this. You weren't sure that you did because you got hired late in January and you missed part of the evaluation process. Then I would have rather spent that Kirk Cousins money building up the rest of the team. That's basically the long and the short of it.
I will say, at least in my opinion, taking Penix at 8, despite the Kirk Cousins stuff, was still a little bit of a shock compared to general draft consensus. But that happens all the time. I think was the
that happens all the time. I'm not slacking them for that at all.
No. But I do think it's at least in interesting context. I think his over under was at 32.5. maybe. Yeah. So to have him go 8, I know that some people who I really respect, like Dane Brugler and Nate Tice over The Athletic, had a midday 2 grade, kind of around 3 area for Michael Penix. But scouts are different than coaches. I guess, he had an incredible pro day, throwing sessions, and impressed everybody like interpersonally as well. And he rocketed up boards. So it's obviously people who sit behind their computer or even, watch the tape or even go to the games have a different perspective, different puzzle pieces than those boots on the ground and those interpersonal aspects as well. So I like what you said, though, Scott. It's a really good point. In a long enough timeline, if Penix ends up being a franchise caliber quarterback, it's not going to matter. But right now, it just doesn't feel congruent.
Yeah, it's just it's reactions, and that's what the reactions are. Winning solves everything.
Yep,
everything. Winning solves everything. But there's multiple ways to do things, and we're here to discuss them. We'll like some, we won't like some. Doesn't mean we're right. Doesn't mean we're wrong. But we love the conversation with you. And a guy like Jimmy Ragsdale coming in, he says, I wish they would have just drafted Penix and not paid $100 million to Kirk. Me too. Spend that money on defense then. Just made no sense to sign and draft. If Penix is great, then he can adapt. Yeah, again, there'll be some questions about, was Penix taken too high? That's the conversation I wish we were having, instead of why do you spend $100 million, $90 million over 3 years, if you cut him, dead cap, et cetera, et cetera. We can get into all that. And go quarterback, especially one that's 24 years old with experience that you think should be able to come in and compete right away. Again. And, the question, I think it was Slim Slug. I can't remember your screen name. You said, did you see the Albert Breer? I did. I understand the pick. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it. It doesn't matter. They don't care what I think. But Terry Fontenot is way out on a limb with this one. Way out on a limb. Not with just Kirk Cousins and the money, but with Michael Penix and where he was drafted. That's not a bold statement. Whether it works, whether you back it, whether you blindly have faith and believe that this is the right move, because Falcons fans are circling the wagons with all of the negative press that's been coming their way. They've circled the wagons and they're fighting back out. I get it. Terry Fontenot's out on a limb with this one. So win, it won't matter. You win, and it absolutely will not matter. Keith and Ellen Johnson coming in with some stars. He says, are you sad? This is a great question because I love the word he uses here. Are you satisfied with the receivers we have? What do you think? What do you think? Considering you passed on Rome Odunze, considering the second round receivers you didn't take one in the draft, and this was a really deep class for wide receivers. Are you satisfied with the receivers that and I mean pass catchers in general? I include Bijan Robinson in there. With the receivers you have.
I mean, if you include Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson, you are as relatively satisfied in the room as you should be at any point in the team building process, right? It's kind of like pass rusher or defensive line or cornerback or offensive line depth. Honestly, how much do you need? More, if possible. Difference maker. Now with wide receiver, there is only one football, so it's not to the same level as defensive line depth. But still, if you can get difference makers out there, especially for a cerebral quarterback who can identify things pre-snap rather than a quarterback who's all tools, kind of learning it along the process where they're going to spam their number one guy, a smart quarterback who can determine where to go matchup wise, getting different versatile, viable weapons is key. And I mean, I feel you're as satisfied as you can be, I think, overall, but you still should be hunting. I mean, your wide receiver 2 right now, Darnell Mooney, excited about Rondale Moore, but a little bit more gadgety. It would be nice to have somebody a little bit stronger to go with Drake May, but maybe that's Kyle Pitts in the end, or Bijan Robinson. So you're not going to lose this season or not go where you want to this season because of the pass catchers. But, we're always going to be looking at the next few picks after Michael Penix and comparing them. Like if Rome Odunze goes on to be a Hall of Famer and Penix is just a Tua Tagovailoa caliber quarterback, obviously a different kind of player, but I don't know. Then you probably would rather have the Hall of Fame wide receiver, but that's just me.
The question here is satisfied. Are you satisfied? Yes, I am. I'm satisfied with the receivers. When I start going down the needs that the Atlanta Falcons have, wide receiver in general comes a little bit farther down the list. Right now, for me, the number one is still, honestly, the number one for me is probably safety 2. As far as where is the biggest hole on the team is probably, in my mind right now, is the second safety next to Jesse Bates, and then probably the cornerback, and then the edge. Now, on the whole, as far as premium positions and where would I like to see resources spent, the edge would be the biggest impact possible player that you can get here. But I have a question for you on this. But as far as receivers go, it's why I always – do you take Rome Odunze if he's there, only if you just think he's gaga? The way they fell at gaga over Michael Penix, that's where you take a receiver, because I think the team's pretty dang good on offense, period, right now. Could they do better at wide receiver too? They brought in some guys to try and take that job. So we'll see on that one.
And I think as far as the immediacy goes, this team, I agree with you that the biggest holes are the cornerback 2, opposite of AJ Terrell, especially with AJ Terrell about to get paid. It'd be nice to have a rookie cornerback contract.
I've forgotten this point 3 times, Nick. So I wanted you to get into this because it's about the schemes on this. If I don't have a really great edge rusher, last year you saw what the Falcons did. They ran 3 down linemen into Bud Dupree as a 4. Does this team set up right now to be a base nickel? 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers. One of your linebackers is a wild card you can use in a bunch of spots. Ebiketie coming in. But it sure comes out because, as Terry said at the beginning, they go 8 deep across the defensive front. They're pretty well stacked on the defensive line now. 2 deep.
Interior.
Yeah, but if you go 4 across,
Zach
Harrison's an end. Ruka Rohoro can be an end. Taquan Graham can be an end. If I go 4 across the front, and then I use speed on my back 7 with, how I use the Troy Anderson, Caden Ellis, Landman's the steady guy, and I can make up for some of my personnel deficiencies with numbers on the back side. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, you also have Lorenzo Carter in the fold as well, another kind of those hybrid guys. You have one of the Ellis brothers out here. There's
for packages, you bring them in pass rush situations, but your base ends up being a big ass 4-man front and then speed all over the place behind them.
In theory, I mean, also just in general across the NFL, base nickel is the new normal. The question is if you're running a 4-2-5 or 3-3-5 or 5-1-5 in the end. Sorry to go into the Friends reference there for you, Scott. I know you love that one, but it'll be interesting to see how they play. I mean, you are going with Morris and Lake, who are different than what you had last season coming from New Orleans, where they were after the pocket cruncher types. And Morris has been a little bit of a chameleon, right? He ran much more of the Tampa Bay cover 3 stuff, and then went to the Rams and ran more of the Brandon Staley stuff and kind of merged it, which was really, a credit to him. Sean McVay. Typically, you don't see a defensive coordinator come in and be told by the head coach, this is the principles that we want you to run, and it work when it's kind of counterintuitive to what you've done historically. Just the run fits don't typically match with the coverage on the back end. We saw that with Denver last season with Vance Joseph trying to run more Vic Fangio stuff, and it was really ugly early on until they switched to more Vance Joseph stuff. But I digress. It'll be interesting to see the personnel packages. On paper, since you are so deep on the defense, you could, in theory, run a kind of more of a Seattle style of defense where you have the Michael Bennett as an edge, but he's really 280 pounds. He's
which is Zach Harrison, which could be Orohiro, which take one outside. I just think you get big on the interior with some quick guys because you're not overly big at defensive tackle. Onyemata and Grady Jarrett aren't huge, but I can go 290 plus across a front 4 and then go speed on the back 7, and I can bring guys from all over the place. It also gives me a defensive back. It's like, okay, I don't feel great about my cornerback too, but I can drop Clark Phillips on his side, and I've got 2 really good slot corners that I like. Okay, well let's help. Let's run some help, and I got 4 defensive backs coaches to scheme the secondary on the roster. So Corey Carter brings up a point here. He says the first pick was so bad, or at least it got so much attention, that it took away from how bad the trade-up value was in the second. So the Falcons went from 40, 43? Were they a little bit behind that? What was that pick? Was it 43? Yeah, and they took, and Arizona took a corner that we liked from the Senior Bowl, Max Milton, and they went to 35, and they gave up a third to do it. That seemed a little expensive to me at the time. And so the value on it now, again, well, if you hit on the defensive line, then it doesn't matter. I know all that. But right now we're talking about the process of, are you getting value for what you are trading? Is 79 a little expensive to move up 8 spots in the second? I kind of agree with this one. That does seem a little bit pricey for me.
Yeah, it is a little pricey. I thought the trade up for Ruka Rohoro was also a little pricey, but
that was it. That was the one.
That was That was a little pricey to give up that third. But I mean, you identified him
back in return, so they did get one back in return. But again, Corey, I think it was a little pricey. Yeah. If you're going to miss on a 290-pound guy that runs a 4.9,
yeah, especially because he's a little bit of a developmental project. But I mean, the tools he has, the length, the athleticism, and the run stopping on tape, on top of the versatility. I mean, I understand. Believe me, Scott, I understand falling in love with a toolsy defensive lineman. So it makes sense to me if you identified him. I might have been a little bit more okay, though, standing back because we hadn't really had the defensive tackle run yet. I guess one positive is that while you did trade up, it wasn't a Los Angeles Rams going up for Braden Fisk kind of value, where they gave up an unbelievable amount to move up for a defensive tackle. But yeah, Arororo is going to be a fun player for you regardless. And you mentioned, the Kevin,
Kevin Knight, Falcoholic.
Knight. Yes, Falcoholic. Was it Kennedy? No, Kevin Knight, talking about how it's definitely a setting up a long-term perspective. That's what happens when you draft a quarterback who's not going to start right away, and defensive line in general.
That was the theme of the show on Monday.
Yep.
The draft grades are meaningless because they're about immediacy. Mm-hmm. How a draft actually is, you look back in 3 years. So the Falcons draft grades are bad. I don't care.
And I will say also, I will say also that despite going so much defensive line day 2 early in this draft, early and often, I mean, all your day 2 picks were defensive line. You came out with 3, but that shouldn't keep you from going another defensive lineman, specifically edge rusher, early next season in a class that looks good, because you don't have a Batman. You don't have an Avenger out there on the defensive line.
What it does do, Nick, and I want to get to this before I forget. Apologies. I know I interrupt Nick a lot. It's because I forget what I want to say if I don't. A lot of questions in the chat about Calais Campbell. I think when you draft 3 defensive tackles, 3 defensive linemen, and you talk about the versatility, I don't think Calais Campbell's coming back. I think we've just shut the door on Calais Campbell coming back to the Atlanta Falcons. My opinion, but if he was coming back, I don't think you take 3 guys and especially trading up for 1. Again, that's a long-term pick. I know, Scott, but I don't think Calais Campbell is coming back, Nick.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, if he's still out there and you have an injury to the room, you can have a different conversation. But yeah, that's a great player. We'll see what happens. He might retire, or he's probably one who's going to slow play it at this point, Scott, right? Why go through OTAs and all that crap when you've done what you've done already?
I'll show up in the middle of August. Thank you.
Yep. God bless. He's deserved that chance. We got Boney's Bluff Gaming coming in here with the pretty sick logo there. I need my own logo. I don't know what it would be. Something stupid. Mountain, maybe. If the Falcons don't win the division, fire everybody. I don't care if we are one and done on a coach that can't win this division. I think it's probably a little hasty to fire everyone, especially with this point. Is Arthur Blank going to want to rip it apart? He doesn't seem that overly reactionary. I mean, if anything, he's loyal to a fault. So I think that's probably not possible. But if this team bottoms out this year, it might be bye-bye to Terry Fontenot. That's one where I'm curious who had the real power in this room in the draft process, because Fontenot drafted like he has all the job security in the world. But given the results we've seen to date, considering the level of competition in the NFC South, I don't think he should feel safe. So that's one we'll watch out for.
Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall the last few years to see where the power dynamic was? Because the draft strategy just took a 180 from when Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot were together and you're drafting. Kyle Pitts is a win now. Now, I debunked that for 3 years that was ridiculous. Wide receiver, running back. Running back is absolutely a win now move with Bijan Robinson. That's not one you're taking for, he could sit for 3 or 4 years and we'd be happy. No. That's very different. So that the strategy just totally flipped. And I'd be real interested to find out the power dynamic. Who wanted Justin Fields? Who didn't? Did both of them not want him? Could you have traded down or not? All those questions. How much did Arthur Smith, was he running the room compared to Terry Fontenot? And now how much input does Raheem Morris have compared to Terry Fontenot? Very interesting to me. Jacob Coons coming in. He says, what is our best possible outcome for defensive backs before the season? That DeMarco Hellams becomes a stud and Mike Hughes takes another step up. That's best case. For me, signing Justin Simmons would be a woohoo type of moment for this team. I think he is just a round peg in a round hole. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. That the stuff that you could do with him and Jesse Bates and their versatility back there would be amazing. And I think you could afford it. I don't think he'd be overly expensive. You've got your expensive safety. And, Nick, as we've said, there is no price on a game changer. Jesse Bates was a game changer. He's worth every freaking penny. I don't think Justin Simmons would be all that expensive, relatively speaking, to what he was cut for, and would be a perfect fit for this team, for this franchise, for this city. Jacob, Justin Simmons.
Yeah, he'd be a fantastic get for you. You should have the money to get it done. I mean, I would say that you're in a win now mode leading up into the draft, and then I'm not sure what happens there. But your free agency and your signings were more win now, so maybe that's one you could go get, and that's an area where you can probably make the biggest difference on this team right now. You're not going to go out and sign an edge rusher better than what you have right now, or a cornerback better than what you have right now, but you still have a safety out there. I mean, again, comment in here about DeMarco Hellams. Maybe he ends up the guy there. I mean, we were not ranting, but raving about him preseason last year as a 7th round pick. He looked like he belonged, and maybe you can go youth and relative cheapness there when you have a guy like Bates. But I don't know. I think bringing in Simmons would raise your floor and ceiling a heck of a lot, given the intelligence, how he could play off of with Bates, and the turnover impact that he has. I mean, the ball just finds Justin Simmons.
Want to and Khalil Mack, he's a no. He's staying in LA Chargers. He's staying there. Khalil Mack, saw some of the comments here. Corey Carter's fired up today. I'm going to do these in reverse order from when they came in. Corey, I think they fit a little better. He says, appreciate the super. He says, we just drafted Penix over Beck, Manning, Aaron Nolan, and every other QB coming out in the next few years. Fontenot won't be here to answer for it. Again, I don't think you can count on a quarterback 2 years down the road. Too much can change between now and then. I'm fully behind trust your board. Okay. When you say trust the coaches, I've said a zillion times, I've put it in writing. I don't trust the coaches to get it right. I trust them to do what they think is right. And if they think it's right, don't bend to outside pressure. That's how you will. If this is what you think is right, by God, you got to stick with it. You've got to go with it. And if you love Michael Penix, and as Terry Fontenot said, and I agree with him, everybody in the room loves this guy. If we pass on him and he's a star, that's unforgivable. He's right. He's right. Now, whether you agree with him that he is the guy, that's a different conversation. So, but yes, Corey, he's way out on a limb with this. And the good point that I think you make with this one, 2 wrongs don't make a right. The strange pursuit of Deshaun Watson seemingly caused the overdrafting that just occurred. This regime will be gone in 2 years. Corey, thanks for the super. And it's strange. That was an Arthur Blank driven pursuit of Deshaun Watson. He ain't going anywhere, without being morbid. He's not going anywhere. How has the ripple effects, and this can be another show one day, maybe not today, y'all, but the ripple effects of that failed move are still playing out today. You alienated your quarterback instead of being able to use Matt Ryan as a bridge get out from under his contract a little bit. You missed that opportunity to draft and develop under Matt Ryan, and now you're kind of overcorrecting. If you get it right, it's okay. It's the most important position in sports. In sports is starting quarterback, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, not even close. I guess you could argue a singular starting pitcher might have more impact on a game, but that's one side of every 5 or 4, 5, 6 games. So that's about it, really. So, I mean, maybe you'd also argue an absolute superstar at in the NBA because there's only 5 guys on the court. So, I mean, that's the reason that, it's the same freaking team over and over again when you do have a truly elite guy. But
team to team, yes, Michael Jordan is going to win you more games than Tom Brady, so to speak. You need more players around Tom Brady than Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly.
But the rule, not the exception.
Yeah,
is the most important position in sports is quarterback, is NFL quarterback.
I mean, there's also a reason that it's so hard too, because you need a great quarterback, but there's the desperation of if you don't have a competent guy, you're going to get fired. But also if you only have a competent guy, good luck, because you have Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Rodgers, Herbert, Stroud. I mean, the bar is very high, but it's a really tough place to be. It's one reason that, Kirk Cousins, very, very good quarterback, and I think he's been playing his best football of his career the last 2-3 seasons. But is he the type of quarterback that can lead you the hurdle over those guys? With a great team around him, sure, but with you paying him a lot, we'll find out.
It raises the floor for sure.
Yeah,
this team is better because Kirk Cousins is on it, without a doubt.
Yep. We got Danielle.
Read the super real quick while I'm looking something else up real quick.
Danielle says, I think that hearing another Mike quarterback with mobility, big arm, left-handed might have been some fan nostalgia for butts in the seats. Talking about obviously Penix to Vic. I mean, very different quarterbacks. I also would not say, despite the 4.5 40 that Penix had, he looked like Joe Flacco out there a lot of times on tape in terms of the big arm, drop back passer, but off the spot, asked to be an athlete in space. Not really on tape the last 2 seasons at Washington. I mean, I think his rushing yards were 8 yards this last season or something for the Washington Huskies. Now, that said, sacks count as rushing yards at the college level, but he also didn't get sacked very much. So it's not like he had a lot of negative sack yards. That's not who he is. He's or was.
He is a passer first. He is a drop back passer with mobility.
It's the reason
I wanted to look it up because I thought I wanted to look this up. That's what I was trying to look up some stats, because how many career yards do you think Michael Penix had playing 6 seasons? Now, he was injured in 4 of them, so it wasn't 6 full seasons, but he played 10, 40, 50 games in college. How many rushing yards do you think he had in his career with a Michael Vick comparison? Daniel, I want you to be able to tell people that you're full of beans. Now, I'm going to illustrate why, if somebody ever says that to you again. How many yards do you think he had rushing in college? He had 265 yards rushing. I was looking up Michael Vick, and I thought Michael Vick may have had a 265-yard rushing game in his career, but no, his best was 175. Only 175. 2 completely different players. Michael Penix isn't even Steve Young when it comes to scrambling and running. Now, can he move the sticks? Yeah, he can. You give him a lane and he's going to burst forward through, but he's not going to beat you with his legs. He was drafted because of that left arm.
Yeah. And I mean, the experience, the ability to do a lot of different option route stuff, and the adversity. Even though he ran a 4.5, it doesn't lend itself to that on tape. So can he do that? I guess, I mean, in theory, but you got to trust what the tape says in the end. And he plays a little bit stiff and not overly athletic. There's not a lot of plays where he's outside the pocket, throwing it across his body, crazy arm talent, Patrick Mahomes kind of stuff. But the arm talent from a static drop back is as good as anybody in this draft. I mean, it's a special ability to drive the football. It's one reason that I came back to. It's who does his play style remind you of? It's a little bit Joe Flacco, which is, you're hoping for more than Joe Flacco on the whole, but as far as, if you keep him clean, if you give him a runway, a really good pocket, can he operate in tight spaces? We'll see. But if you keep him really clean and he can sit back there and hit that back foot and throw it, he can spin it like anybody. I mean, he could any spot on the field. It's open to him.
Coach comes in with a $5 super. He says, "Morning studs," with a coffee emoji. Win the day. Get your Lion coffee. I know I've seen some people who they're brewing theirs right now. Check the description of the podcast. You've got a code at lioncoffee.com for 20% off. It is in the description of wherever you're watching this, including if you're listening after the fact. It will be in the description, and we'll drop that in the chat as well. Big thanks to Lion Coffee, and big thanks to Coach. Greg says, "I'm not mad at the pick at all. There are such things as good mistakes. True Falcons fan have seen bad mistakes, i.e. Parade Jerry and the Minnesota guy we traded for." I'll go back to, speaking of bad trade-ups, was when Dan Reeves, the year after the Super Bowl, so that would have been the draft of 1999, trades a future first to get a second-round pick and took tight end Reggie Kelly. That was an eye-opener. Reggie Kelly was a blocking tight end, and that future first ended up being Jamal Lewis to the Baltimore Ravens, who rushed for 1,500 yards for multiple teams back when running backs were cool. That was bad. Bruce Pickens, when the Big 8, Big 10, whatever they called them back then, was running all wishbones, and the Falcons kept drafting defensive backs out of the Big 12, the Big 8, out of these option offenses. Those were mistakes. No, Greg, this was... Again, if we roll it back far enough, I have said multiple times that getting a rookie quarterback was my number one choice. Getting a bridge with him would have been number one, and just getting the rookie would have been number two. But getting Russell Wilson or Justin Fields for a year while you hedge for your rookie would have been my number one choice. That kind of went out the window when you spent $90 million on Kirk Cousins. So I'm mad that they spent that money on Kirk Cousins now instead of going after some younger defensive players to build around this term on a longer future. This is, I believe, with Michael Penix over the course of a 17-game season, $100 million in guaranteed money in free agency into the defense, you can still win this division. You still could have, and you would have been set up better for the future. That's gone now. This team is good. This is a good team. How they allocate resources is for debates and for fun. This team is good, and they should still win the division. Vegas thinks so too. Mike Harvey said, "I felt horrified coming in with a super chat by the picks at first, but now I get it. I like the pick now. Best passer in the draft. We'll see. We'll see." And I went back and watched my initial reaction, and my initial reaction was, why did you sign Kirk Cousins then? This isn't about Penix. I don't mind the Penix pick. I really don't. Would it have been my number one choice? I probably would have gone McCarthy first. Scott, you're an idiot. Okay, fine. I might be an idiot. But Michael Penix can flat out sling it. He has a first-round arm, Nick. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, again, can he operate in really tight spaces? How's he going to be over the middle of the field in the quick game? Because a lot of the stuff, now granted, he had 3 NFL wide receivers, and it makes sense, and especially in the spread it out Pac-12, that you are seeing him throw outside the numbers when you have that kind of arm. But at the NFL level, with how they squeeze the sidelines in the deep ball, you're going to have to be able to operate middle of the field. And that's a little bit of a question mark for me, especially in the Sean McVay disciple offense. That's one reason you mentioned McCarthy. They identified Penix as better. Based on what we've seen, I would say that McCarthy is a little bit cleaner scheme-wise, a little bit more projectable to the scheme. But again, they might run something very different, and they might have identified Penix as a lot better. But the scheme fit with Penix compared to Cousins feels different. And also the age ramp, right? Like, I think if you take McCarthy there at 8, he's 21 years old. He's not going to be 27, 28 by the time he's getting a shot, where Penix is probably, 26, 27, 28. But we'll see. Again, they went through the process. I think, like I've said many times, I think it was siloed. They went in, okay, Arthur Blank, we want to get a quarterback who's competent, especially after what we had the last 2 seasons. Kirk Cousins wants to come here. He's a good scheme fit. Hallelujah. Let's do it. Okay, now we're on to the draft. We're going to do our due diligence on the quarterbacks because we have to. Holy bleep, we absolutely love Michael Penix. We might not be up here again. You that confident? Me too. Let's take him. Not really a coherent plan, but it makes sense if they happened in isolation from each other. And if they loved Penix that much, if they had that big of a grade on him, I understand it, but it's a risky pick to do that
They're
with where
out
you're
on
at.
a limb.
Yep.
And Nick, my final point, then I'm gonna let you go to get started on Mile High Huddle because I want to get some of the super chats that have come in and keep the conversation going here for a few more minutes. Is I feel like you should have had a better idea about Michael Penix before you signed Kirk Cousins, because that was the if you believe what Connor Orr wrote, Connor Orr is a different person than Albert Breer. What Albert Breer wrote about, they called up to try and get into the top 3 and were rebuffed, saying, no, you can't do it. Okay, well, then we need to go after Kirk Cousins because we can't get into the top 3. All right, well, you needed to have a better idea that a Heisman, the leading passer in the NFL, in college football, and a Heisman Trophy finalist could have been your guy before you spent $100 million. That's my point on that. Yes, you started a little bit late, but Terry Fontenot was still there. His scouts were still there, and I feel like they should have had a better idea on Penix before free agency. Nick, get going. He's going to get going. I want to finish off some of the conversation with some of these super chats that we've got, and we'll end up going the full hour here. So, Nick, see you soon.
I do want to give a quick shout out. I don't know if we put out the promo, but Lion Coffee, God bless you. Thank you so much. I'm going to go start that one, but I'm out. I need to get a little bit more going after the poor sleep. So I'll be on in about 120, 180 seconds. So we'll see you then.
Okay. See you in a bit. Corey Carter, he's come in multiple times. He's fired up today. He says, this is an arrogant regime that continues to act as if they are smarter than everyone else, and it's exposed by the draft annually. It's Corey, I don't know that I even want to say arrogant. It feels a little bit disorganized to a certain extent. When you've got Arthur Blank stirring the drink on the Deshaun Watson thing, and then you go back to the, just how it went with this one. It's like, yes, we want to try and get up to get a quarterback with number 3. Oh, we can't? Okay, well, then we better get Kirk Cousins. Oh, wait, but we really like somebody else too. Well, now we've got both of them. Nobody's going to like this pick, but crap, I know we already spent the money, but I can't pass on this guy. Okay, again, I called it buyer's remorse. And the question was asked of me on in the YouTube comments, says, what do you think about Albert Breer's article? And my big takeaway was, I think if Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson had been hired on January 1st, I think things would have been differently. I think they would have done things differently. I don't think Kirk Cousins is an Atlanta Falcon. That won't last long, and Kirk Cousins is going to be a good player for the Atlanta Falcons. So, Corey, thanks you for all the support today. INFFG Tyrone, thanks for coming in, man. He says, not a Falcons fan, but are they the conversation for Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel? That is an interesting question. You start looking at T. Higgins too as a possibility. I went and looked at the salary cap numbers for next year for the Atlanta Falcons, and they look good. That's been one of my favorite things about Terry Fontenot is the salary cap management. Right now, if you look at Spot Rack, it says 41.4 in available space. Well, that's plenty to get one of those top wide receivers if you wanted one. Wanted to make a trade for one, if that's what you felt like you needed to do. But it's better than that. It really is. Because you've got Jake Matthews. You've got flexibility on his number, or he's down to a $12 million dead cap. Grady Jarrett has some big restructure capabilities. You've got $16 million savings on Grady Jarrett. Now, I'm not advocating for getting rid of Grady Jarrett or Jake Matthews. I'm just saying you have flexibility. Flexibility is a way to create much more salary cap space. The big one, though, if you look at it, is Caleb McGarry. He jumps to a $16.5 million cap hit next year, and his dead cap is $2 million. I just said for another $40 million. So you're talking about $80 million of Arthur Blank's money that you can go after in free agency or trades. And then finally, Nighthawk Runner comes in. He says, which quarterback we have was Blank's pick and which was the coach's pick. And again, that kind of goes back to the overcorrecting on the Deshaun Watson blunder. Could have been worse. You could have actually made the deal. Would you rather be where Atlanta is right now or where Cleveland is right now with all of those? They still didn't have a first-round pick. Again, I'm never for the big trade up. The big, huge trade ups just scare the bejesus out of me. I would much rather take a shot on Michael Penix than trade 3 first-round picks to try and get up into the top 3. Without a doubt, no questions asked. But which one? Win now? Felt like Arthur Blank. Okay, we can't miss on this quarterback. He's your quarterback for the next 10 years. Felt like a GM pick that you have to get Arthur Blank to sign off on before you can make it. So you probably have to talk Arthur Blank into being able to do this. Terry Fontenot admitted this isn't going to be a popular pick. This is going to cause some consternation. It's going to get dragged. But at the end of the day, if it works out, no one's going to care. People are going to be happy about it. We believe in Michael Penix. And I love the quote again. You don't get to where you are unless you believe in yourself. And if you bend to outside pressures, you're not going to get to where you are. If everybody in this room, all the decision makers in this room love Michael Penix, and if we don't take him out of fear, out of past, whatever, if we talk ourselves out of it and he goes on to be a star somewhere else, that is unforgivable. I agree with him 100%. So stick it to your guns on that one, despite the negative noise, because the negative noise will go away if you win. Michael Penix or not, Kirk Cousins is going to help this team win. This team should be a playoff team. Go to allfalcons.com. You'll see how good the odds are. Fourth best in the NFL for making the playoffs this year. Those are good things. It was a great chat today, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I want to say thank you to our Super Chat superstars who came in. Jason, Oblivion Empire, kicking us off. Keith Brugman over on Facebook. Keith and Ellen Johnson over on Facebook. Corey Carter with multiples. Boney's Bluff Gaming. Jacob Coons. Corey Carter again, like I said. Daniel Keenan over on Facebook as well. Coach, good to see you. Custom Kicks, awesome. Thank you so much. Mike Harvey. Tyrone jumping in. Nighthawk Runner also. And then I want to finish. Mike Harvey's coming in one more time. We'll get out of here. And then Edward Brown with the big orange, the $20 super. And Mike coming in at the buzzer. Almost missed you, Mike. He says, I know this seems superficial, but I hate the unis. Look at Adam Sandler's The Longest Yard. Go back to red, black, and silver. If you go to allfalcons.com and I use the picture of the playoff odds, I'll just show you. I'll show you what I think about what you have to say. When I talked about a good news type of thing, the picture I used for playoff odds and the player I used, there you go. There you go. And if you're listening after the fact, it's Bijan Robinson. Should be the star of the show coming in next year. Not coming in next year, but in 2024. Should be is poised to have a superstar type of year with those red helmets, the black jerseys, some combination of such. Mike, I agree with you. And it annoys me how much the Atlanta Falcons social media team hypes up the throwback helmets and jerseys when they know we love them. Just change them back. Change them back. Awesome to be here. I'll be back on Friday. We'll talk some Atlanta Falcons. We'll see if there's any more news that comes up and all of the kind of things that go with it. Y'all were awesome today. Thank you so much. I hope you'll have a great Wednesday. It is gorgeous out there. Get outside if you can. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you Friday.